In order to get good with girls, you have to be willing to fail a lot. The failure and rejections that you go through are actually the very things that will make you stronger so that you can have the confidence inside of yourself to actually be successful. And we'll talk about this in more detail in a bit. But first of all, something that most people don't seem to realize is that getting good with girls is just like learning any other skill. For example, it would be pretty ridiculous if you were to see someone who's really good at playing the piano, and then if you go and try to play it yourself and you suck at it, then because of that, you come to the conclusion that either the person who is talented at piano is just naturally born with that ability and didn't spend the years training that it actually took him to get good, or you even blame the piano itself for being an asshole and not producing good music when you try to play it. Obviously, this is kind of ridiculous, but it's exactly the kind of rationalization that a lot of people have when it comes to girls. Like, guys who are good with girls are just alpha chads who were born with natural looks and charisma and skills with women, completely disregarding the fact that when they were teenagers growing up, or at some point in their lives, they actually spent many years striving towards that, like dating different girls, going through rejections and breakups and all sorts of drama and stuff like that. Or they blame the girl herself for being like a bitch, or like female psychology is rigged against you. And there are psychological reasons that people tend to think these kinds of things, and I'm not going to get into that right now, but the truth is that getting good with girls is actually a skill, just like any other skill. And to learn any skill, you have to practice in order to improve and slowly get better over time. So with girls, through trial and error, you learn how to start a conversation, how to manage your energy and face fear, how to establish an underlying connection with eye contact, how to deepen that connection and lead things towards sex, and basically just how to do everything in a way where you can meet girls and know what you're doing and be confident doing it. Without any experience, you're never going to be able to do any of these things. But in order to get any of this experience, you have to pass through rejection and failure and frustration, pain, drama, and even heartbreak. It's a necessary part of the process that you can't escape. But this is not a bad thing. This is actually where you will make all the gains and get all the necessary experience so that you can improve and eventually be very successful. And there are two basic reasons why failure is so important. First of all, you will learn through failure. Basically, by trying out different things, you'll learn what doesn't work and what triggers negative responses. And through this experience, over time, you'll be able to calibrate and learn from your mistakes until you get an intuitive feel for what actually does work. Like, if you've ever seen an example of how artificial intelligence neural networks learn to do certain tasks, like play a video game, for example, in the beginning, it mostly just completely fails. But through all the failure, there will always be a few attempts that worked a little better and made it a little bit further. So then in the next generation of attempts, these little successes are used as the new starting point. And then again, through trial and error, it gets a little bit further and a little bit further until it can finish the whole thing. This is how the human brain also works to learn any skill. So the more that you try and the more that you fail, the better you're going to get. Kobe Bryant missed more basketball shots than anyone in NBA history. The very best actually fail more than anyone else. And it's exactly the same when it comes to girls, where you need to fail to learn how to do everything. And then just like a video game, you'll slowly be able to make it further and further. And this applies at every step of the way. For example, if you start getting girls' phone numbers and then you try setting up dates, maybe you'll try texting different things and sometimes you'll get a response, but sometimes you'll just get ignored or rejected. And in the beginning, when you're learning this, more often than not, you're just going to get rejected. Maybe like 1 out of 10 times, the girl will actually want to meet up with you. Or maybe even a lot less than that. Like, you might have to pass through a lot of rejections before you ever get your first initial success. But if you persist with this, over time, you'll learn through trial and error what kinds of things you need to text so that you're more likely to get a good response. But then maybe as you continue this, you'll start to learn that the things that that you text are actually not that important. What's more important is the depth of connection that you establish with the girl before you ever get her phone number in the first place. And when you have that depth of connection, then it doesn't really matter all that much what exactly you text her. She'll just want to meet up with you. So you'll start to get an intuitive feel for these kinds of things. So the point is that there are levels to this, but you have to pass through a lot of failure all along the way in order to learn any of it. But even more important than just learning the specific skills is that by passing through rejection and failure, you will acclimatize to it so that it doesn't affect you as much, and you can maintain your energy and state, and therefore maintain the polarity and attraction and connection between you and the girl, which is necessary in order to move things forward. In other words, by passing through rejection and failure, you will build the inner strength and confidence that is necessary to attract girls and be successful. Because if you don't build up this kind of strength, then you're not really going to be able to handle the possibility of rejection. And on some level, this is going to show through in your behavior. First of all, you're not going to be willing to take any risks. Like, you're not going to make moves, and you're not going to lead, and you're not going to do any of the things that are necessary to be successful, maybe even including talking to the girl in the first place. And also, there's just going to be a subtle neediness where you'll be emotionally reacting to her, where you feel that you are in her frame and in her world and under her judgment, and kind of like supplicating and feeding off of her validation, and being careful not to insult her or disagree with her and stuff like that. And you might not even be consciously aware of any of this, but on some level, she can sense it, and because of that, she's just not going to be attracted to you. But if you build up a fortification inside of yourself by going through rejections and failure and recovering from it and coming back stronger than before, then it's like a workout of your entire emotional system, where you build up the strength to handle the possibility that a girl might reject you. So you're not really affected by that, and you're not dependent on her validation or dependent on the outcome of whatever happens between you and her. And this will likewise show through in your behavior in such a way that it draws her in and makes her attracted to you. And if you keep going through this kind of process of gaining experience and passing through failure, over time, you can work your way up to dating hotter and hotter girls and have the ability to handle the kind of pressure that comes along with that. Just to give an example to illustrate how this works, I remember the first time I ever slept with a fashion model. Leading up to that, a couple months earlier, I made a conscious decision to purposely try to level up and date a higher level of girl that up to that point, I would just kind of not even consider trying because they were a little bit too intimidating for me. So at that time, I already had the skills to meet and date and sleep with girls who were quite attractive. So I knew how to do everything. But when you move up to the next level of hotter girls, in a way, you're kind of like a beginner again. Maybe not a total beginner, but it's kind of like playing a video game at a harder difficulty level, because there's a lot more pressure involved on an unconscious level when you date hotter girls. So as I was trying to do this, there were a number of different fashion models that I met, and I got a few phone numbers and went on a couple of dates. But for a while, I kept failing. And the reason was basically because I still had underlying weaknesses inside of me that made me start reacting when I would get little rejections, and there wouldn't be a deep enough connection. And basically, I just did not yet have the strength to be successful on that level. But then when I did actually sleep with a girl who was a model, she was working for the top modeling agency in Taiwan. I was traveling there at the time. It basically took all my energy and effort and will to actually make it happen. So I did it, and things actually went very smoothly and naturally as far as what happened externally, and things were good between us, but internally there was a struggle, and it was definitely not easy for me. And then afterwards, after I left Taiwan, there was a period of about 6 months where I was kind of screwed up, where basically my system had to adapt to that new layer of pressure that I had exposed my unconscious mind to by sleeping with her. her. Because when you go through this kind of process, it takes time for your system to adapt to the pressure and stress on a deep psychological level. But once you do, this is actually what makes you stronger. And I'm not going to get into too much detail about all this right now. If you're interested in learning about these deeper aspects, then you can check out the link in the description where I teach all of this in a lot more detail. But the point for now is that it's kind of like working out, where you need to pass through rejection and failure in order to build up the strength inside of yourself so that you can actually handle success. So just like with working out, where if you want to increase the amount of weight that you can lift, then it takes will and effort and struggle and pain and a lot of failure in order to do it. I recently started running, and it's the same thing, where like if I want to run faster, then it takes a force of will where I have to really push myself beyond my current limits. And it's difficult, and a lot of times I gas out and fail, but through this kind of effort and struggle, I slowly get better. Whereas if I was to just go through the motions without that additional struggle and effort, then I would just plateau and never really improve. But then once you do actually break through your previous limitations and get a little bit better, then that becomes the new baseline, and it's no longer so difficult. So at the time when I slept with that girl in Taiwan, it was kind of like a grueling inner struggle for me to be able to do that. But then over time, after adapting to it and continuing to meet and date other girls, now I'm at the point where I date women who are more beautiful than she is, and it wouldn't be very difficult for me to handle her now. And this is just one specific example, but it's the same basic process that happens every step of the way, including within relationships and everything else, where there is struggle and failure and pain and rejection, but all of this will make you stronger and better with women over time. So basically, to sum everything up, there's a process that you have to go through to get good with women, and in order to go through this process, you have to be willing to fail. This willingness to fail is extremely important. Otherwise, it's like there's a barrier that will prevent you from ever getting any experience or making any improvement at all. So my message is basically go out and fail a lot. And then if you persist with it, after a while, you'll probably start to get pretty good. And again, if you want more in-depth training to actually go through this kind of process, then you can click on the link in the description. And other than that, I will talk to you in the next video.